My name is Nicole, and I'm an addict, and my sobriety date is July 13th of 2015, and I am on medically assisted treatment currently. Right now, I'm on Suboxone, and I'm in the middle of a taper program, actually, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you back to the beginning, and I'll kind of share with you guys what it was like before my active addiction, during my active addiction, and then now that I'm in recovery. So, when I was younger, I was growing up and I lived in a small country town in Arkansas. I was actually born in New York. My mom's Mexican and my dad's Italian. And growing up when I was younger, I was a little bit different than everybody else, like visually different because I'm brown, And I grew up in a small town and we went to a little country school. And this was the first time that I remember as a young girl really realizing that, I was different, but not only was I different because, I was half Mexican, but I was different because I felt different on the inside. And I always was searching for this like validation from others. I always wanted to be a part of and fit in with the cool people. And that started for me from a really young age. I was always just really wanting to fit in. And so I had low self-esteem. I was a little bit chunky, and being a girl when I was, younger, I had that insecurity that I wasn't, pretty like all the other girls because I had struggled with my weight. And here in my family, we love to eat. My mom cooks such good, like authentic Mexican food. And then my dad, his parents would come down and they would visit us, and we would eat homemade Italian, like all kinds of pasta and just deliciously good foods. So growing up, I had two little sisters, Michelle and Christine, and they are my best friends today. But I'm the oldest. So there's like 17, 18 months difference between our ages. And so when we were growing up, we were always really, really close. Through my grade school days, I always realized that I was a little bit different, but I ended up, fitting in and, having a whole bunch of friends when I was younger. Like I've always been super outgoing and never had like a problem getting to know people. But I always just kind of like, felt like I had to be in the middle of everything. So when we were growing up around I think I was probably like 16, my sister Michelle started struggling with like really bad behavior problems. And this is before I ever even tried drugs or alcohol. My family was going through a really hard time. She was leaving the house, running away. I mean, there was just chaos. And that's when we found out that my sister had a really bad, like, mental illness. She had bipolar and some other things I don't even know, but she ended up having to go away to this place in Little Rock where they had her for like 6 months. And at that time, me and my younger sister were really struggling because my sister would like come home and get into fights with my parents and pull knives on my mom, and it was just chaotic. So me and my baby sister were kind of like sliding under the radar. And at that time I met this guy and I started dating him. He was my first boyfriend, and I just fell in love with him. And he was my first everything. And he smoked pot, and that's how it all began. And I'm not saying like marijuana was like what made me decide to start shooting up, you know what I mean? But that's how it began. Like I let my guard down because I was raised up so strict. My mom had us go into like a Pentecostal church. We couldn't cut our hair. We couldn't wear makeup. And we had to wear dresses. And so we were raised up super duper strict. Well, then, by the time I hit junior high, I was kind of like being able to do things, and my parents were more focused on my sister and her mental illness. So when I started dating this guy, that's when I tried pot, and that's how it all started. I started doing pot, and then I was introduced to cocaine. And when I started doing stimulants, cocaine and methamphetamine, that's what really just took it over the edge for me. It was like the first time I did cocaine, I realized that it made me feel like I could do anything. It made me have so much energy. It made me not want to eat. And as a 17-year-old, girl, I was on the dance team, and I was very active in all my like social things at school. I was on the band. I wanted to have like, I don't know, it just gave me this feeling. And that was the feeling I had been looking for. I felt like all my life. I was like, this is it. I have found the magic substance that I need to achieve everything in life. And right then at 17 years old, I was like hooked. I was hooked on drugs. And at that time, I didn't have like a dealer or anything. So I would just get cocaine when I could. I was going to parties. I was at all kinds of keg parties after basketball games, parties before. It was just like a nonstop party for me, and my grades automatically started dropping. But you got to remember, my mom and dad were so consumed with my sister and this mental illness and her being away in this behavioral home that it was nothing they could have done, because I was going to do what I wanted to do. But at that time, they were not as focused like they would normally be on me and my other sister. So I was just really slipping through the cracks, and my grades started dropping. I remember I was a junior in high school, and I was getting all C's, all D's, and I had to retake algebra because I was going to flunk out. And it was like a big ordeal. But like I said, my parents just really didn't even realize it because they were so consumed with my sister. Then I went into my senior year of high school, and I was about to graduate, and I barely even passed with D's, all D's, because what I was doing was I was skipping school, smoking pot, doing cocaine, doing methamphetamine. And here where I live in Arkansas, everybody cooks methamphetamine. I mean, you could probably go down a road and there'd be 2 houses where there's somebody in there cooking dope. And like I said, I lived in a really small country town, so it was everywhere. Even parents that, like some of my friends' parents, would be on it. And so it was like not hard. So once I graduated high school, I barely passed. I literally passed with D's. And I can remember this because it was an important time in my life. My grandmother flew down from New York to see me graduate high school. And I can remember my dad just being like, she barely even passed. She passed with all D's. You know, and so it was horrible, but they were proud of me because I graduated high school, and so that was like, I guess, like one of the lowest graduation times. You know, my other sister graduated with like really good grades. But anyway, I graduated, and I was living at home still at that time, and I was still dating the same guy, and I got a job, and I started working for JCPenney actually at that time. And that's when my addiction just took a whole new level, because I was able to fund my addiction, and I was not in high school anymore. I was staying out. I wasn't coming home. I was sleeping over at my boyfriend's house, and this boyfriend at the time was very on me about my weight, because like I said, I always have fluctuated with my weight. And I know a lot of girls go through the same thing, like where they get hooked on stimulants because of the issues that they have with weight. So I started, really using cocaine and methamphetamine on a regular basis, but more so methamphetamine because it was just so much easier for me to get. And I dropped down to about 120 pounds, which is the skinniest I've ever been. And I was working full-time at JCPenney. I just bought a car. My parents had helped me, co-signed for me a car. And I remember telling my mom and dad, like, I'm leaving. I'm moving out. I don't want to be here anymore. And I, moved in with one of my girlfriends. And that's when everything just changed. And I became an everyday methamphetamine smoker. I was smoking meth all day, every day, going to work high, giving people things from the store to get free dope. And it became like everything in my life was consumed by methamphetamine. It actually me and this guy ended up breaking up, and I was single and just getting high all the time. And I moved in with one of my friends who was actually cooking dope. And within 6 months of moving in with him, I had started intravenously injecting methamphetamine. And when I started IV methamphetamine, it was just like, it was was the most powerful substance I've ever done in my whole entire life. And whenever I would inject it, it would take me into a whole nother, like I would be a totally different person. And I was constantly injecting to the point where I was so thin, so malnourished that I just looked like a bag of bones. And within 6 months of the first time I ever injected methamphetamine, I got pulled over in my car and charged with a Class C felony, which is a possession of a controlled substance. And I got put on probation for 3 years. And that's when everything really just, it was like they put me on probation and told me, can you do this? Are you going to stay sober? And I remember thinking, yeah, I can stay sober. And I thought, yeah, I can do it, but I didn't want to. I didn't want to change. At this time, I didn't see anything wrong with what I was doing. I still very much so enjoyed the high produced by drugs and alcohol, because I would do anything I could get my hands on. But I knew that I needed to stay sober because I needed to get off probation. Well, the first year I was on probation, I failed every drug screen, and about 1 month before my first year was up on probation, my probation officer said, you know what, I'm going to give you a chance. I'm going to help you out, and I'm going to put you in treatment. So she gave me a chance, put me in treatment, and when I went into treatment, I excelled. And that's something that I've always done. You can put me in a group of people, or in jail, or in treatment or anything, and I'm going to excel. I'm going to talk to everybody. I'm going to listen to the rules. I'm going to comply and do what I need to do. And that's what I did. I was in treatment. I was learning. I was kind of hearing the message, but not all the way. And 30 days went by, which it wouldn't have even touched the 30 days isn't even enough to, I came right back out and relapsed, basically. They offered to let me live there and move into a halfway house, but I wanted to come back, of course, to my hometown where the drugs were at. And I remember thinking I was going to stay sober, but I came right back to where I left, same people, places, and things, and nothing changed. I didn't miss a beat, came back, relapsed right away. So I am still on probation, and it's a 3-year probation. So I came back and I failed a couple more drug tests, and that's when my probation officer said, you know, it's over. Like, I am sending you to prison. And I had never even been to jail before. So here I am. I call my mom and my dad, and I'm like, I'm going to prison. Like, I'm going down for a year. I have to do a year. And I remember driving my car to the jail and putting the keys to my car in the trunk, not the trunk, but where the gas thingy is, opening it up and sticking my keys in there, calling my mom and telling her where the keys were at, and to please come and pick up my stuff, because I didn't want it to just sit there, because I couldn't leave. Nobody could bail me out. I was there. And I had to withdraw in jail and go through, because I was shooting meth, but I would do anything. So I was on Xanax and opiates, and I went in there and I went through withdrawal, and it sucked, but most of the time I just slept and was ill a little bit the first couple days. But at this time, like, it was mainly methamphetamine that I was abusing. So I spent 60 days in county jail, and then they took me and they drove me up to Pine Bluff, Arkansas, to a regional, it's called RPF, Regional Punishment Facility. And what it is it's a boot camp style prison where everything you do is military. You march everywhere, you make your bed military style, everything. And so it's a huge compound, right? Probably like 400 girls on this compound, about 60 girls to a unit. And the units are like houses. And inside the houses, you walk in, and it's got a big old open room with just racks, metal beds with little bitty mattresses that you sleep on, and those itchy wool covers. It was terrible, but it was supposed to be like a drug rehabilitation because it's for nonviolent offenders. So, but what you do is you go in there and they have you on this, it's kind of like a therapeutic community. So it's a behavioral. They're trying to help you with your behavior, to teach you to stay sober and, do the right thing. But what you're actually doing is you have to go in there and you have to gain status to leave. So I was in there for a year. And so I had to go in and work my way up the ranks. And the way you did that was you had to turn people in for breaking the rules. And so what us girls would do is we would have, like, a group of us would all get together and we would write each other up for different incidents that weren't very serious. So that way we could gain our status, but we wouldn't get the other person in so much trouble that they would end up having to go to the hole. Because you could get put in the hole for 3 days and not be able to come out, and the hole, they don't give you a blanket, nothing. You just have to sleep on the mattress in your, in your jail outfit, and it sucks. It's nothing that you want to do. And so we didn't want each other to have to go into the hole at all. So I stayed in there for, I had to stay in there for a year and gain my status one write-up at a time. And eventually I only got put in the hole one time, and I got put in the hole because somebody that wasn't my friend wrote me up for sexually acting out. And that's one of the things that was really big in there, was girls would get in there and they would go gay for the stay with each other. And I was not going to do that. But one of the girls that I got in there with, we got into an argument, and she ended up writing me up for that, and I had to go in the hole for 3 days. And I remember laying in there, and it was so awful because you can't talk to anybody. You're just all by yourself. Well, while I was in prison, my parents were the only people that wrote me, the only people that came to visit me. And I can remember my mom and dad coming every Saturday to see me, and them just wanting me to be sober and to come out and not do the same thing I was doing. My parents would come up there and visit me, and they were the only ones that would visit me. And I would cry every time they would come, and I had all these friends when I went to prison, all these drug friends. That's one thing that, I have to make sure I clarify, is, I didn't have any friends. I didn't have anybody that really cared about me. The only people I had in my life were people that could benefit me, were people that I could get high with or that could get me high, or vice versa. So when I got locked up, I went in there alone, and my mom and dad came to visit me, and I would cry and they would cry, and I just remember having so much hope that I was going to get out and stay sober. And I remember even changing everything. I remember reaching out and getting put into a halfway house here where I live now, which is a different part of Arkansas. And I reached out, got put into a halfway house, and it was actually like a treatment center halfway house, to where we would have AA and NA meetings. And I had 6 months left on paper when I paroled out from prison, and I made it the whole 6 months without relapsing. I got a job. I started working for Kroger, which is like a grocery store here where I live, and they promoted me. In 5 months, they promoted me to assistant manager of the deli. And I remember I was so proud of myself, because I was getting back on my feet. I got a sponsor. I started working the 12 steps. I started going to meetings. If you were at a meeting, you were going to see me there. I was chairing meetings. I was the secretary of my home group. I dove in headfirst and got really connected, straight out of prison. And because I knew if I didn't get connected, that I was not going to stay sober. And that's one thing that I had learned in the first treatment center, is that I needed to get with other people that had been through what I've been through to stay sober. Well, 6 months went by. I got promoted, and I started letting my job take priority over everything. And slowly but surely, I stopped going to meetings. Slowly but surely, I stopped calling my sponsor, and I relapsed. And that's when I relapsed, and I started shooting roxycodone. And roxycodone and methamphetamine and smoking crack. And, it was terrible. I was homeless. I got kicked out of the halfway house, of course, and I started couch surfing here where I live. And that was in 2011. So because I didn't get sober in 2015, the next 4 years, I was literally living from house to house in different people's, on their couches. I was working a job and paying people to sleep on their couches just so I could get high. That's what I did all day, every day. Smoke crack, shoot Roxy's, shoot meth, and go to work. And eventually I lost my job and I lost my car. I lost everything. But what changed everything, that last time that I went back out is I didn't come back. Like I didn't go back to any meetings. I left the halfway house and I had just given up. I was like, you know what? I'm kind of like condensing this a little bit because in between all those different times I've relapsed, between prison, between that halfway house, I had been to 5 rehabs. And I was back and forth. And so between those next 5 years, I was in and out of rehabs, but I would come right out. It was almost like I would take 30 days to relax, get my weight back on, start feeling better, get some clothes and find a new place to live. And then I would relapse again. And, for me, when I started shooting opiates, it was like a whole new beast for me, because now I had this like physical addiction where I couldn't function unless I had opiates every day. I would wake up in the morning and I would be so sick. And when I was at the time, heroin just started coming into Arkansas where I was at, and heroin was not something that like I would have to search for it, but Roxy's and Dilaudids and morphine, those were everywhere, because in Arkansas it's like a city where a lot of people come, or a state where a lot of people retire, and there are a lot of older people, and a lot of people that are in poverty. And so what a lot of people do is they'll get prescriptions and they'll just sell them. And so there was pills everywhere, and so I got hooked on Roxy's really, really bad. And I stayed hooked on Roxy's, like stayed on that and methamphetamine. And I was just, oh my God, I was hallucinating. I was couch surfing. And I moved in with my friend Tara, and she let me sleep on her couch. And I lost everything. I lost my car. It got impounded. I sold it to this lady for $3,000 cash. Gave my parents a couple thousand and took the other $1,000 and spent it all on Roxy's and Xanax. I can remember that like it was yesterday, because it was like I felt like I had hit gold, And I still knew that like what I was doing was wrong, but I had given up like even trying to get better anymore. I had just kind of fallen into this, I'm going to die an addict. I'm going to die with a needle in my arm, and that's just what it is. And that's what I did every day. And in 2012, I met my husband that I'm married to now. And when I met Neil, it was like love at first sight. He's a ginger and his hair is so pretty. And I remember looking at him and thinking, I'm going to marry him. And little did I know that he was an addict just like I am. And so we started talking to each other. I can remember us just sitting on the couch and like talking all night long. Of course, we were high. And, just like getting to know each other and realizing that we had so much in common, and then also realizing that we were both addicts. And I brought him home to meet my parents, and my mom sat us down and she was like, this is never going to work out. Like, y'all are both addicts, and this is y'all are going to kill each other. Well, we weren't going to listen to anything anybody had to say, and we wanted to be together, so we got together. And she was right. When me and him got together, it was like fire and gasoline, and our addictions were just like 10 times worse while we were together, because now I had Neil, who had money, and he had a job, and he had a family who still enabled him, and he had me, who had these connections and wasn't afraid to run around and go do this and that. And so you put us together, and it was like we were dying. That year, the first year that we got together, I was in the hospital in and out for overdosing on opiates and benzos. And the same with him. And his family didn't know what to do, because we were both all they knew to do was to give us money, because he had gotten his parents so to where they believed everything that we said. So they would believe when we were in pain. They would believe when we were hurting, and they were our biggest enablers. And, my mom and dad, they had cut me off a long time ago, especially when I came out of prison and relapsed. That was kind of like, they're like, we are done. You can't live with us. And so I never even really tried to go back there because I knew they would never have me back. Well, Neil and I ended up getting pregnant. And I guess I kind of glossed over a lot of my story to get to this point, because this is where a lot of the things that I went through, I'm very ashamed of, and I'm not proud of any of this at all. But I have to share it with you guys because it's so important. So in 2013, I got pregnant, and I didn't even know I was pregnant. My father-in-law looked at me one day and he said, "Are you pregnant?" And I was like, "No." And I went a week later and had a pregnancy test, and I was pregnant. And I remember being like so afraid, because I just thought, I'm pregnant. What am I going to do? I can't stay sober. I'm hooked on, the needle. It was just, how am I going to do this? And so we sat down with Neil's parents and we decided, we're going to have this baby. And that's when I was like, I'm going to do this. I've got to stay sober. I've got to change my life for my son, Well, that didn't happen. The whole pregnancy, the whole time I was pregnant, I was shooting methamphetamine and taking other pills and just staying high. That's all I did was stay high. And in July of 2014, my son was born July 4th. And it was July 3rd morning. I woke up at 5 a.m. or I'd been up all night long, and it's 5 a.m. And I called my husband and I was like, I'm going to have this baby. Like, I can feel it. And I had been up all night tweaking on meth. And he came home and we went to the hospital at 8 o'clock, and it was 8 o'clock in the morning, and I was only dilated to like 1 or 2. So they let me go back home. And I was like, when I tell you that I was high on methamphetamine, like I was high on methamphetamine, and I was going to go in and give birth to my son. And I remember knowing that they were going to take him that day. And I stayed at home for about 10 more hours and was my labor was all in my back, and it was so painful. And on top of that, I was so high. So when I gave in and gave birth to my son, I was so afraid. And he came out and he was completely perfect. He had no drugs in his system. And that's a miracle right there. That's the only way I can explain it to anybody. And when I tell this story, because I've told my story a couple other times before, every time I think back to this time, that there's only one thing I can explain, and that's God saved my son, because I was not taking care of myself. I stayed high 24/7 while I was pregnant. I'm not proud of it at all, but it's the truth, and it's what happened. And when my son was born, he was perfect. He scored very well on all his tests that they give newborn babies, and they allowed me to take him home with me. We stayed in the hospital for about 2 days, which is normal. And I went home, and I was like, this is it. I'm not going to get high. I'm staying sober, and I got to breastfeed this baby. This is it. This is what it's going to be. I didn't change anything, though. I didn't go out to get help. I didn't go to meetings. And I relapsed. I think it was 3 months after I had Nathaniel, I relapsed. And me and my husband both relapsed, because here we are trying to stay sober together. But I never changed anything. I never went and did anything different, but try to stay sober, try to lock myself up in my house with a newborn. I ended up going to the doctor and getting diagnosed with postpartum depression, which it was bad, but I truly believe it was because of the fact that I was using, drugs on top of it. After I relapsed, I put Nathaniel on formula, and I was injecting methamphetamine and Roxy's, and thank God we lived with my mother and father-in-law, and they were able to step in and take care of my son for me, because at that time I was leaving. and I wasn't coming home. I would not come home for nights and just stay strung out. And in 2015, 2 days before my son's first birthday, my friend called DHS on me. And they came to my door and they said, we need you to come down and take a drug screen. And I went down there and took a drug screen. Of course, I failed. And they came back to my house and drug screened my husband. And he failed. And that's when they told us that they were going to have to remove my son from our care. And that day is when I went to treatment. I went into treatment that day and came out 30 days later, and DHS was, I had to go to court. I had to fight to get my son back. And at that time, I did not think I could stay sober. And I had looked back at all my previous times at trying to get sober and relapse after relapse after relapse. And I thought, I got to do something different this time. And so me and my husband both got put on Suboxone. And I remember when I did it, I was very against it. He got put on it before I did, and he kind of told me when I caught out of treatment, he said, I went and got put on Suboxone. And I remember being so angry at him because I thought I had all these misconceptions that if you were on Suboxone, that you were still wanting to use drugs and that you were getting high still, because I'd really never had any experience with it. And he had been on methadone and Suboxone before I hadn't ever met him. And so I was very new to it. Well, when I came out of treatment and found out that he was on Suboxone, I was like, oh God, well, if I'm not on Suboxone, I'm going to take his Suboxone, because I'm a drug addict and that's what I'm going to do. And so I remember sitting down with my mom and my dad and his parents and my therapist, and we all talked about it. And that's when I decided, I'll get on Suboxone. So I got on medically assisted treatment. And the first time I took it, because I didn't have any opiates in my system, it really was a lot. And I remember thinking that I can't do this. But then the next day, I was fine. And then the next day, even better. And now, I take it in the morning and I don't even feel it. But that's been 4 years now. But while I've been on medically assisted treatment, I knew I had to do so much more than just get on Suboxone. And what Suboxone was for me was insurance on me staying sober almost, because I had to work to get my little boy back. And when I tell you, I showed up to every court date. I did everything I was supposed to do and more. And I ended up getting my son back within about 10 months of him being removed from my care. And me and my husband both worked so hard. And, I was thinking maybe he could go with my mother-in-law, but at this time, they wouldn't let him go with anybody that was related to us. So my son had to go into foster care. And I'm so grateful because the foster care people that he got placed with were good people, and I'm still in contact with them to this day. But now, in hindsight, when I look back on it, I realize if my son had gotten placed with my family, I might never have gotten sober, because it would have just been another way for me to be enabled. So as much as it hurts me to say that, my son had to get removed from my care and go into foster care, it was the best thing that ever happened to me, because it saved my life, because it made me realize I had to do something different. Everything that I had done before was not working anymore. And from the time I was 17 till the time I was 32, I was in active addiction, with intervals of jail and treatment in between, scattered in between. And I had never, except for the one time I got out of prison, really got involved in a 12-step program and started working the program. Well, being on Suboxone has been kind of controversial when it comes to a lot of 12-step fellowships. And they might say that they don't feel like that, but it's not the 12-step fellowship that feels that way. It's the individual people that ruin it for a lot of people like me. who judge other people and tell them they don't need to be on medication-assisted therapy, or tell them they don't need to be on their antidepressants. And I'm not talking about like Xanax or something. I'm talking about people who are rogue, and they just want to tell you that you need to be completely abstinent from everything. And for some people, that just doesn't work, you know. And I had tried abstinence for so many years, and my experience was that I always ended up relapsing. And so getting put on Suboxone gave me that extra foundation to really get involved and start changing my thinking and changing my life. And I started, you know, I worked with a sponsor who was amazing, who actually like told me, you just do what you need to do. You follow the doctor's orders and you stay on the medication for as long as you need to until you're ready to get off, if you ever are ready to get off. And I'm so grateful that I had somebody like that who was accepting and has helped me, because I have already felt so much judgment from other addicts in recovery on me because of being on Suboxone. And so for the last 4 years, I've been working 12 steps with my sponsor. I've went through them. Now I'm on my third time through the 12 steps. And it's been amazing, the experience that I've had working through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous with my sponsor. That's one thing I will say. It's changed my life. It's taught me a new perspective on things. It's helped me to learn how to live my life, you know, better. It's actually helped me in every aspect of my life. But while I've been on, you know, working the 12 steps, I've been on Suboxone. So now what I'm doing, and, you know, I work with a lot of other people who are on medically assisted treatment, because whenever I got on it, I noticed that there wasn't a lot of support for people that were on Suboxone or methadone. And so I started just like sharing my experience with other people who were also on it. And I think it's really important for me to talk about being on medically assisted treatment, because I know there are a lot of people who get on it and they just use it to abuse it. They skip their dose and they, you know, they sell it, or they, whatever, diverting their medications. And that's not what not what I stand for. You know, I follow my doctor's orders, just like I'm following his taper plan. I'm tapering very, very low and slow. I actually went from 12 to 8 milligrams, but we went from 12 to 10, 10 to 8, and then I go back August 15th and we'll go down again 2 more milligrams. And we're doing that every third month. I go down 2 milligrams. And once I get down to like 1 milligram, we'll go down even lower. And it's slowly. So getting on medically assisted treatment has just helped, like I said, helped me with my foundation, okay? And so I started just sharing my experience with other people, so that way we could like help other people who are on medically assisted treatment. I really try to advocate for like just all-inclusive recovery and accepting people where they're at and being loving and tolerant in all ways. And I want other people to know that were like me, who struggled getting sober. You know, some people will look at it and say, well, that was just because you weren't willing to change. You know, and I don't really have time to think about what it was because of. All I know is that that's the situation that I'm in now, and I'm working really hard to get slowly and slowly off Suboxone, so that way I can live my life, you know, completely free from, you know, any kind of narcotic substance. But I like to think about it like anybody, if they need help, it doesn't matter if they're on, you know, Suboxone or methadone, or if they have to be on medications for mental illness. You know, it's all about, like, my perspective on life has changed. I don't want to get high anymore because I love myself today. And that's something that I didn't feel before. You know, before I got sober and I started working with my sponsor, I hated myself. I was insecure. I was full of fear. I just didn't feel good about me. And now today, because of the 12 steps and because of the support that I found, you know, through my Suboxone doctor and other people who are on medically assisted treatment, like today, now I'm learning to love myself and be a better person. And because of my son being born, it has given me motivation to change my life. I don't know if I ever would have changed if my son hadn't been born, you know. And I hate that it even had to be like that, but those are the things that had to happen to me for me to even wake up to change, because addiction had such a stronghold on me. And I remember hearing stories about mothers who would use drugs while they were pregnant with their kids. And I would think, I would never do that. And I can remember hearing about people who shot up, and I would think, I would never do that. And every single thing I said I would never do, I ended up doing in my addiction. You know, drugs took precedent over everything in my life, even my own child. And I'm just so grateful for him being born and for my friend calling DHS on me. For a long time, I had a resentment. I hated her guts. I didn't understand why she did it. Now I look back on that and I realize that if she hadn't done that, I wouldn't even be here today, you know? And so I'm so grateful, and I try to share my experience and what I'm going through right now with other people, so if they're going through the same thing, they can, get help too, and not to be ashamed if they need extra help, because this disease is killing people every single day. And when I was shooting up, there wasn't fentanyl and carfentanil and all this stuff that people are dying from now. I can just imagine I wouldn't have made it. I would be dead. I would be dead. If I was shooting dope today, I would be dead. So I am just so grateful to even be able to share with other people, hey, this is what's working for me. This is how I'm doing it. But I want people to know, like, I'm not just sitting here, relying on Suboxone to keep me sober. Like, I work my butt off, I do meetings. I have connections and meetings on my channel. I mean, I do all kinds of things to really stay connected with my higher power, and stay connected with my sponsor, and stay connected with my support network, because that's what helps me stay sober. If I didn't have, people in my life who understood the disease of addiction and who have been through it themselves, I wouldn't know what to do, because my mom and dad are addicts. My husband's parents are addicts. And that's another thing. My husband is sober too. We're both sober, and we're both living our life, doing the right thing. He's working a job and very successful at that job. And our little boy is 5 years old now, and he starts kindergarten in like 3 weeks. And we are able to live our lives without getting high anymore. And that's a miracle, because I didn't ever think I was going to be able to live my life without getting high. And that's my story.